Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host. My name's Nathan Battershall. And today I want to talk about a topic I haven't spoken about yet. It's a topic around selling development sites with the uplift of an approval. Now, a lot of times, and especially on this podcast, we talk a lot about doing projects and doing developments. But there's one thing that I haven't spoken about, and it's a strategy a lot of developers have, and they keep up their sleeve and they use to be able to execute an approval on a site and then on-sell that site without executing the construction and get the uplift of putting the approval on that property. So the reality is, anywhere you go, when you get a raw piece of land, for example, an infill block with an old house on it, the moment you get an approval on it, often you'll see a development uplift. Now, whether that be an approval of some townhouses or a two-lot subdivision, or it could be the approval of a dual occupancy. It could be the approval of a land subdivision, whether it be large or small. Any type of development or apartments. There's so many different options of what you can do, but at times you'll find over your development journey that sometimes you'll find that it's actually it's more economical to be able to on-sell that property and get the uplift of an approval. Now, sometimes it could be due to cash flow, and that's why I always talk to people about having alternate exit strategies. And if you do any type of education or around property, investment, doing projects, doing developments, you're always taught to have exit strategies and alternate methods should you need to exit that deal earlier in the piece. And I always say this is a really smart strategy because it gives you that ability, should you need to or should you want to be able to, as soon as you've executed the approval on that site, to be able to exit. Now, when I say exit, essentially it's giving you that option to potentially sell the property with the uplift or with the approval. Now, look, sometimes you'll get a site and there's little uplift. I find things like dual occupancies, often there's not a lot of uplift. Unless it was a site that was very tricky or it's a highly profitable site. If it's a highly profitable site and was quite challenging to execute an approval, sometimes you'll find that you can get good uplift on that property. But other times you'll find that dual occupancy sites, and I know from my own experience where people have come to us with a CDC or a DA approved dual occupancy site, and straight away it only takes two minutes to look at the approval and to see why they're selling it. Often it's because they've overcapitalised on the build. We see that all the time where they've put these huge basements and they've maxed out the site, and then when you run the numbers and you run the FISO, you realise it just doesn't stack up. They've either got emotionally invested and they've overcooked it, they've just maxed it out when it shouldn't have been, or they've just really just missed the mark, or it could be a design that's just not buildable, it's not suitable for the area. And it just doesn't stack up. So it essentially means you're back to the drawing board. And so when that's the case, the approval's useless. It's not even worth the paper it's written on. So you need to be careful of those ones. But look, there are a lot of sites where, especially things like land subdivisions, where you're able to execute a land subdivision where you can sell that site. Sometimes you can make $1 million or 1.5 or 250, 300, 400, 500,000 or more. And so it can be quite a profitable little strategy in actually pulling off projects. And if you read the book called The Deal Maker from Donald Trump, if you look at a lot of the deals Donald Trump did, quite a few of his profitable deals, development deals that he did, he didn't actually develop the site. Now, he used, obviously, property options in a lot of those cases. Other times he just got an approval and executed that approval and then sold the site with the uplift and made quite a lot of money. And even in my own journey, like we did a project in the Western Sydney in Austral, a land subdivision, 23 lot land subdivision. In that case, we didn't even execute the approval. All we did was get some plans, subdivision plans drawn up. We got all the stormwater information, had a pre-DA meeting with council, got the pre-DA minutes, and we executed a really good package, feasibility package, and then we were able to on-sell that project for a six-figure sum. And at the time, it wasn't feasible for myself and a business partner to fund that development. So the easiest thing for us was to execute the approval, or in that case, execute the documentation and get the high confidence information from council in that pre-DA. And then that was enough to be able to then on-sell that to a land developer. We made some really good money with we put a very small amount of money in. In fact, it was only $5,000 each we put in, and we were able to pull a six-figure sum of money out each on that project. And it was quite a good little profitable project. And look, for me, there's a strategy for that. And I look at some people where what they sometimes look to do, and I think it's a great little strategy, is often they'll have one development on the go, a highly profitable development on the go, and they might have another development where the sole purpose is a cash flow purpose. So the purpose is to get that site, execute the approval, on-sell it, not take the risk of doing the construction, and to be able to generate some capital, generate some cash flow through doing that. And it works especially well for someone who is maybe possibly moved out of having a day-to-day job and where they're doing this as a business. So they have that ability. They need to generate cash flow, because one of the tricky things in doing projects and developments is it can be a tricky space for cash flow. So the advantage of this is that you're able to execute the approval, not have to do the construction, on-sell the product, generate some capital to enable you to either funnel that into your development that you're actually building, or to have cash flow so that you can live and do it again. And everyone's got a different way and strategy in which they enact that type of product. So look, that's a really key strategy, and I think it's one that often gets overlooked. And for me, a couple of things to look at when you're looking to do this type of strategy. One of the great things you can look to do, especially if it's a land subdivision or a large townhouse site, something with a bit of volume about it, is what I encourage people to do is try and get an option on that site. Now, options can be tricky to negotiate, tricky to get, but I find the bigger the site, the easier it is to execute the option, because it's a very common and a very known and a very accepted method of executing a deal in that space. It's very difficult to option small sites, for example, dual lock, small townhouse sites, or very small subdivision sites. Not to say it can't be done, but it's difficult. And obviously being able to do it off market makes it a lot easier. You can negotiate directly with the vendor, with the decision makers, rather than through an agent or someone who's obviously pushing to get a now sale, now deal. If you can do that, you can obviously minimise then holding costs, which is key. If you can't get an option, obviously delayed settlements are handy as well. If you can get a longer settlement to enable you to execute that approval, minimise interest, holding costs, all that side of it. But ideally, in an ideal situation, if you can get a call option, it's brilliant. Now, obviously, you've got a call option and a put and call. So a call option means you're not obligated to settle on that property. A put and call means that you've got a time frame that you are holding that deal, and then at that given time frame, you then have to exchange and settle on that property. Whereas a call option, which is the best option in terms of when you're doing projects and developments, it gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility, because it means you can novate or on-sell that option to another party. Now, that's how I did that deal in Austral, that land subdivision deal. We were able to get a call option on that property with a decent term on it. So in that case, we got 24 months. So we got a call option On that site, for an agreed price, we just paid a small deposit, very small. I'm talking like 10K deposit on that property. 24-month option. It was a call option, which meant that we can walk away after that 24 months. But the beauty is it gave us time to go and get some plans drawn for the 23 lot land subdivision. It gave us the ability to get some good advice and feedback for stormwater, to run a really accurate and detailed FISO, to put together an information memorandum pack, just a pack that we could then really look at the ins and outs of that project. But it then gave us the opportunity, and at the time we were looking to develop it. One thing or another changed, and we decided it was actually more profitable and better for us to exit. And our exit was to novate and sell that option to a land developer. So we were able to put that out there. It hit a really good return, knowing that most developers want to hit 20-25% minimum. This one was hitting quite a way above that. So essentially anything above that 20-25%, potentially we could look to add that as our option fee or our ability to be able to sell that deal. And then from there, we were able to obviously sell that deal, generate some wealth, generate some capital, and exit, and then move on to the next thing and fund some other projects. So for me, it's a great little strategy. And if it's something that you're looking to do, it's a great little starting point as well. If you don't necessarily have the capital to be able to execute the project, is start looking around for a site or some deals you can do something like that. Look, optioning can be tricky, can be difficult, time consuming. There's so many different ways to do it, but look, it can be done, and I've done a few since. And they're a great little earner if you can pull them off. And you've just got to be, obviously, like any development, you still got to run your numbers. It's no point optioning a site that's not profitable. It's no point optioning a site that's constrained by issues, because the reality is, if your strategy is to exit and to novate and sell that option or sell that deal, if it's fully constrained and it's got issues and headaches, well, the reality is the people that you're trying to sell that to, who are switched on, often more switched on than you, they're doing all their due diligence, okay, before they purchase that site. So you're then left with a deal that you've pumped a whole lot of money into that's no good to anyone. That's where you have to treat it like you are going to develop it. And that's where I think you need to be just as cautious. You need to show just as much wisdom as you would if you were going the entire way through that project. Because you need to remember and put yourself in the shoes of the person that you were looking to novate or sell that deal to, that they're buying this because they want to see this through to the end, okay? So if it doesn't stack up, you've wasted a whole lot of money on DAs, on documentation, on consultants, on council fees, all of that sort of thing, only to have a property and a project that does not work. That's why you have to spend just as much time doing your due diligence, running your numbers, really exercising your feasibility and tweaking it and, going through it and really scrutinising it to ensure that it stacks up and that it works and that it's profitable. And so for me, it's a great little strategy out there. And I think there's so many infill areas that you can find, that you can look for, and look at them through the lens of what can you do on that site. There's so many sites out there, great little infill sites, where all of a sudden you could do a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lot land subdivision in there. Now, these type of developments are brilliant for things like builders, smaller builders. To be able to buy a property, or civil contractors is another big one, because there's a lot of civil companies out there who are obviously doing large land subdivisions, contracting out to large land developers. But the thing I'm seeing a lot of now is a lot of these land civil contractors or civil companies that now are wanting to execute their own developments. And a lot of them, you'll find, because they've got all the equipment, they've got all the ability to be able to execute and pull off the construction of that subdivision. Often sometimes they're partnering up with builders, but a lot of times they're they've got the means and the ability to do those small lot land subdivisions themselves. And because they're smaller deals, like I find that sweet spots like anywhere from 4 to say 14, 15 blocks or 10, is a brilliant little space where if you can find these sites, execute these little approvals, and then you can essentially on-sell that approved development to someone like a civil contractor, because they are smaller developments where they can do that and fund that themselves, or they've got the means to be able to execute and pull the trigger on it, and they can obviously save a lot of money because they're doing the construction, all the civil work and all the construction on that subdivision themselves, and they're not too large that they're unmanageable and where they have to break it into a whole lot of stages, and it's tricky from a funding point of view. So they're a great little space. Another great little space is things like infill townhouse sites or villas. They're great as well, because if you can find those sites where you can sort of do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 12 townhouses, they're brilliant little sites, because if you can execute the approval, obviously the traditional developer in themselves, and that's what we talk a lot about on this podcast, wants to get a raw site and execute the approval. But you've got to remember there's a lot of builder developers out there as well who need some now projects. And often you'll find, because of the delays in council, the time it takes to execute those approvals, you'll find that there's a lot of developers and builder developers out there. If the site stacks up and it makes sense, and again, that all comes down to you running the numbers before you even got the site. So when you're running the numbers, then if you're looking at it from a potential exit, you want to look at it through the lens of like this. And this is how you should look at any development you do. You want to look at it through this lens is, do I have an exit strategy where I could not only sell this site to break even, but can I on-sell this with an approval and make profit? So even if circumstances change or I find a more suitable or economical development site I want to do the construction on, can I exit and sell and on-sell this other development site so that I not only break even, but I make some capital and profit that I can either pump into the next development, or I can pull some money out and I can maybe go on a holiday or go on a trip overseas or pay off a mortgage or do what it is that you want to do. And that's the lens you want to look through. And so when you're looking through that lens, you're not then running bare minimum profit margin numbers. You're looking at a profit margin of a traditional development margin that you'd expect and that is acceptable for that project, but also look at, okay, how much could I make if I on-sell this so that the end developer or the end buyer makes the return that they're expecting or wanting, or the industry expectation for that type of development, and how much could I make? Could I on-sell this and make 80 grand? Could I on-sell this development and make 200,000 or 350 or whatever the amount is? And so you've got a really good exit strategy should you choose not to do construction. And I just think it's a great little strategy, but it's also a great little way to attach it to every FISO you run. Because what it does, it gives you a really good, clear exit strategy. And I've seen this where some people then run execute multiple approvals at the same time, knowing that one of them they may sell. Often they will sell as a little cash flow strategy for other projects they want to do. So look, it's a great little strategy. It's something that I think is popular. It's been used all over by different developers, and I think it's a great little way if you don't necessarily want to execute the construction yet, but you want to generate some capital through property. So look, I hope you enjoyed this short episode. As usual, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Share it with anyone and everyone you know that might be interested in doing property or development or doing it with this strategy in mind. So we'll see you next week.